fewer tennis industry leaders have exhibited more pure passion for the sport than South African-born Texas dweller Timothy Heckler. 2000 USPTA Hall of Fame Grand Inductee and International Tennis Hall of Fame's Tennis Education Merit Award winner, Tim Heckler served as the CEO of the United States Professional Tennis Association for 3 decades. Heckler's preeminence in the tennis world was conveyed on the court at slam events, Wimbledon and the US Open, along with esteemed grassroots to pro-level coaching and off-court as a front-runner in technology and organization leadership. The highly respected tennis counselor in 1973 served as the consultant and tennis director for the Bobby Riggs Billie Jean King Match of the Century, held in the Houston Astrodome. Heckler has been appreciated in the professional tennis coaching arena for his crusade to upgrade the tennis teacher's performance and image.
Tim Heckler, Tim Heckler, Tim Heckler. What a grand guy, what a great guy for tennis. He's done a marvelous job.
He brought a lot of respect to the teaching pros. Humble man, he never bragged. He was very close to his family.
He's truly one of the great leaders.
Who's very intelligent, very articulate.
I consider Tim Heckler to be one of the giants of the game.
A world-ranked player who did compete at Wimbledon and other Grand Slam events.
Tim Heckler has always been a leading voice in the tennis industry.
He was an innovator, and he was a creator.
What a great person, a great leader.
The epitome of professionalism.
Tim was a huge innovator.
Tim Heckler, who was a researcher.
If someone wanted to find professional, that's Tim Heckler.
It's been my pleasure to have been a friend and a fellow pro with Tim Heckler.
Well, I think Tim was always a step ahead.
He's just been such a great leader, so had a great business acumen.
He's probably the biggest teddy bear that there is.
Tim the Warrior. In fact, I would say Warrior General.
Tim Heckler has exemplified what a teaching professional should be.
I'd like to thank Tim for his legacy.
He deserves the tennis industry's highest level of recognition for the leadership that he's shown.
Tim has been the face of the USPTA.
A very intelligent and a very far-sighted leader.
He had a big footprint on tennis in the United States and even beyond that.
Tim's the mentor. He's my mentor in spite of the fact we're the same age.
Very much feared him in his tennis game.
He brought us to the high-tech stage.
One thing that Tim Heckler taught me was with each passing moment, the game of tennis changes.
One of the giants in the tennis industry over the last almost 50 years.
Tim is a businessman first, and his business just happened to be tennis. He is the one who turned us into tennis professionals.
Tim Heckler will always be, in my mind, a pro's pro.
I think that Tim Heckler has done more for the tennis teaching professional in the United States and perhaps worldwide than any other single person. He has taken the gauntlet and carried it for the tennis teaching professional for many, many years, regardless of how associations or governing bodies or other associations or private individuals have tried to minimize the importance of a career as a professional tennis instructor. Tim Heckler has exemplified what a teaching professional should be in his own life, and he has carried the torch for other tennis professionals in making it a viable career for many of us who are teaching professionals today and for our children and students who are the tennis teaching professionals of the future. I can't think of anyone else that I've observed in my career as a professor, as a coach, as a teacher, who has done more than what his job requirement asked him to do without ever asking for remuneration or even acknowledgement. Tim has done it because he loved tennis, he loved the professionals, he loved the USPTA, and he did it out of the kindness of his heart and because of the kind of person that he is.
Tim, you started playing tennis at age 3. What do you remember about your junior tennis days in South Africa?
Well, I first feel that I had more fun than any of the other kids did, and really enjoyed going to tournaments and practicing. You know, things are no different then than they are now, where the players who allowed the pressure to get to them were the ones that really didn't do very well. And so there were many tournaments in South Africa, probably 6 or 8, that were a fair distance apart. And I generally went to all of those. So it gave me plenty of time to practice in between and have the fun that I was talking about.
Yeah, Tim and I go back a long way. I remember him at Kalamazoo. I think it was the first time I met him when he came over from South Africa to play the national juniors. And one of the things that always shone through in all the years that I've known Tim is just, he had such a love for the game. And, that eventually translated into wanting to become a better teacher, I think, initially, so that when he became president of the USPTA and then the executive director, he kept pushing teaching professionals to grow, to really grow in the game and match the growth of the professional game itself. So, he wasn't just a guy that kept up with innovations. He was an innovator, and he was a creator.
He never did anything that he didn't have well organized and have dreams about. He drives me to this vacant lot in Southwest Houston. Tim said, out there is going to be the best tennis center that's ever been built. It became Chancellor's Racket Club a year later. It was one of the premier tennis centers in the Houston area. That moment of just showing his dreams of how this should happen carried over to his passion for being respected, being a tennis pro as if you were any other profession.
Tim, you talked about playing junior tennis without pressure.
I didn't even remember pressure. I can tell you an interesting joke. When I came to the United States, I came off the tour, and I was driving in a car back to Lamar University in Texas with my teammates. And one of them from California was telling the story, and he was saying that, he played Roger Worksman, and the guy really psyched him out. And so he continued talking for a few more minutes, and at the end of that conversation, I said to him, Al, what does psych mean? I had never felt it.
I met Tim Heckler in Durban, South Africa, during a junior tournament, and he was like a big guy on the block, and I very much feared him and his tennis game. He always had a sort of a swagger about him that I took a look at and thought, wow, this is one serious dude.
Tim, was tennis more innocent back then and more fun?
Well, I think that tennis was a lot more fun in those days. The tournaments all had a lot of social activity for the kids and for the players. The tour was the same way. Some activity every night, and all the players went to it. And so the camaraderie was really very strong. So I think that helped a lot for some of the old guys when they were once young and on the tour.
Well, personally, I consider Tim Heckler to be one of the giants of the game. He knows the game inside out from his experience as an international player, a coach, and an administrator. Tim's thinking was always how to make the game better for everyone at all levels. As a dear friend, like I say, for over 50 years, we met on the international circuit in Europe, and our friendship will continue to flourish as it has over the years. Tim could work with the highest level of player as well as the lowest coach aspiring to be a tennis pro.
In the many, many years that he ran the USPTA, you could just see the growth of the group. Tim Heckler was and is a very intelligent, strong leader, and a very far-sighted leader. And so the USPTA was very fortunate
to have him as their leader for so many years.
Timmy has some very strong Texas tennis roots. What will Texas always mean to you?
It'll mean everything. I suppose it's because I've lived and worked in Texas for most of my life. It all started while I was playing at Wimbledon, my first trip, and a guy named Hugh Sweeney from Texas walked in the room and he said, "Hey, Heckler, do you want a scholarship in the United States?" And in those days, there wasn't much to do between Wimbledon and the Australian. And so I said, fine, I'll come over there. So I went to college at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. I've worked in Texas, as I said, 40 of the 50 years I've been in the United States. Got many friends, fellow pros, and acquaintances in Texas. And my wife and my in-laws are all from Houston. Everything that I do involves Texas now, and finally, now that I'm not working for the entire nation, I can be a very proud member of the Texas division of USPTA again.
He just had a knack for looking at things, and he could look beyond with the what-ifs. He made you think through. He would be all for doing anything if it was good for tennis and if it was good for the USPTA. The genius part about it is how he was so adept at looking into the future. I mean, just look at our modern game, as it was called.
His vision with the technology, continuing education opportunities, has just kept our organization on the leading edge, if you will. He got us places faster than anybody could dream, in my opinion. And he's a visionary, so I've been very, very proud and been blessed to be a member, and then also been very proud and blessed to know him as an industry leader, as well as someone I really consider a friend.
It's amazing what all Tim Heckler means to the USPTA. He has worked tirelessly to develop the image and professionalism through his leadership and his influence in the industry. He has a long record of notable accomplishments, such as his playing in Grand Slam tournaments, U.S. Open and Wimbledon, his coaching background, club construction and management, and even events such as orchestrating the Battle of Sexes. Tim has been the face of the USPTA and has artfully helped to create the strong image that has led the USPTA to become such a highly respected organization. He's been a tremendous influence in my life and many of us who have worked closely with Tim over the years.
Tim, you motivated thousands of USPTA pros, and along the way, others outside of the industry. Who motivated you?
I would say that, frankly, my motivation was the love of a great game, and the greatest game on earth, in fact, and the long playing background that I developed in Texas. Then, shortly after becoming a teaching pro, I became aware that pros were not given the respect I felt that golf pros and other professionals were. And at that point, I'd like to feel that a determination overtook me to want to spend the rest of my life actually changing that situation.
Tim Heckler is one of the most really remarkable leaders we've had in the world of tennis, particularly in the coaching and teaching of tennis, since I've been around, and I've been around a long time. He has created a legacy that I think will be unmatched in the world of coaching and teaching, and building a trade association that is the envy of everyone in the world, really. He devoted all of his intelligence, all of his talents and skills to something. He had a passion that would never die. He fought courageously for protecting the career paths and the income and the professional tracks that people take in the teaching world. And I think he helped that whole industry grow up and become very mature. And he really paid quite a price himself because, he really didn't take care of himself the way he did. He cared so much about the organization and about making sure that he did the right thing, that he really kind of, didn't pay attention to all the things that maybe everyone else does when it comes to health and wellness and everything else. So, but I have great respect and great admiration for Tim. He deserves the tennis industry's highest level of recognition for the leadership that he's shown. I have great fondness as a friend for Tim, and I have great fondness and respect for him as a person, as a leader, and for the incredible contribution he's made to the world of tennis. He's in a very, very special league, and it's been an honor and a privilege to know him.
Tim, you're a major architect as the directing consultant to the Battle of the Sexes Match of the Century with Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. At that time, what was it like for you to be part of that most impactful tennis happening in the history of the game?
Well, I think it was probably very exciting, but not as well understood then as it is now. It all started out with Bobby Riggs doing, his handicap stints around the country, being tied to a chair and playing everybody and anybody. And then when he beat Margaret Court, that became a bit of an issue because he kept bragging about it. And he found this niche where he started talking about men beating women. And he really wasn't a chauvinist because I knew him really well. When he came to Houston, he did an enormous amount of promotion before the match. And I traveled a little with him on those, and I spent a good deal of time in meetings with him. And chauvinism was not even part of his nature, from what I could tell. I think he just found this niche to fill the seats in the Astrodome.
Tim Heckler has always been a leading voice in the tennis industry, and particularly obviously with the USPTA and the instructional aspect of our sport. I know his want was that everyone who wanted to receive instruction should have it available. I also know he really cared about each of the teaching pros that I call them coaches, that he really wanted them to be entrepreneurial and be a good business person, which would help them personally, but also would help our sport of tennis. Also, he was the tennis director for the King Riggs match in 1973 at the Astrodome, and I don't think there's ever been atmosphere like it before or since. I think the impact was huge, and him being the tennis director there was very instrumental in making that match a success. And in so doing, helped the explosion of participation in our sport and also in the interest level of our professional men's and women's tennis. And he was very kind to me. He came to our World Team Tennis office, probably 10 years ago, and presented me with this framed poster of the King Riggs match. And it's so adorable. I have it right in the conference room of World Team Tennis. So when everybody comes in, they see this King Riggs poster. And of course, they see the price is even $2 in 1973. And I know he was very proud that he was the director for the King Riggs match in 1973 at the Astrodome. So I'm very indebted to him for what he's done for our sport. I think we all hopefully are. And I know he played tennis starting at 3 years old. So believe me, tennis is in Tim Heckler's DNA. And I want to thank him for being such a leading voice in our industry, as I said before.
Tim, your involvement and your contribution to the USPTA has been over 4 decades.
Yeah, well, when you have worked in an organization from the grassroots, I was on the Professional Tennis Association Board of Directors and was the president of that. That took about maybe 6 or 8 years. And then I ran for the national board, and I was on the national board for another 6 or 8 years before becoming the president of USPTA. And then, finally, that's when I started my 30-year stint as the CEO, and allowed me to move forward with a lot of programs that I felt would do good for the image of teaching pros.
Yeah, Tim, that's a long, beautiful marriage between the USPTA and you.
Tim Heckler is truly one of the great leaders in our industry today. In the early 80s, when he became the CEO of USPTA, he was a leader before his time. I mean, with his expertise and knowledge and technology, with his openness to improving methods of coaching and coaching education. He took the United States Professional Tennis Association to where it is today, one of the most respected organizations in the world. Tim was a great mentor to hundreds, possibly thousands of young tennis professionals. He basically was the person that introduced me to Saddlebrook Resort, where I became the Director of Player Development for the Harry Hopman Saddlebrook International Tennis and the Director of Sports and Health Development for Saddlebrook Resort. Tim is not only an incredible friend to me personally, but he is a great friend to the tennis industry and to the great game of tennis. He will be missed.
Tim Heckler has been one of the most important figures in the game of tennis for the last 30 years. I have a lot of great memories with Tim, but I always was the most comfortable being in his office and talking the great game of tennis. One thing that Tim Heckler taught me, it is critical for yourself as a tennis teacher professional and as a player to keep learning and be adept to handle constant change. Thanks, Tim, for all that you have accomplished for the game of tennis.
I first met Tim in the early 1970s when he was a director of tennis at Chancellor's. And I'll never forget, really, the first time I met him, he was standing there with this huge 3-ring binder in his hand, and he was showing all of us all the programs that he had that he used for his club, and they were all inserted into plastic individual sleeves. And I thought to myself at that point that, he was really my kind of guy. After he became the CEO of the USPTA, I can remember him wanting to buy the office building in Houston when real estate was really depressed, and how so many people thought, that he was crazy. And he turned out to be crazy as a fox. I'd hate to think of where the USPTA would be today if we hadn't listened to him. Tim made decisions regarding the USPTA with the best interest of the membership in mind. We always came first. When I think of Tim Heckler, I think of a guy that just reeks with class.
To my good fortune, I met Tim in Singapore, and I asked him to help to bring USPTA to Singapore. Well, he was so generous, he offered the USPTA certification program, which I accepted gladly. Today, every coach in Asia who is worth his salt aspires to be certified by the USPTA. This is Tim's contribution to coach education in Asia. And for that, I'd like to thank Tim for his legacy. Thank you.
Tim, you were a precursor of technology and remained a strong leader in the tech world. What intrigued you about this domain?
I was very fortunate to fall into that position with technology, because it was really a good friend and the president of the USPTA at the time, who was Mike Eikenberry, who came to a board meeting, and he said, coming down on the plane, I read this article on these smaller computers, and I believe Heckler can implement them, and we should try at least one. But in those days, computers, the PC type, were running around $15,000, and a lot more expensive than they are now. But they were also very unfriendly. We were operating not on MS-DOS. Bill Gates hadn't finished that, but on an operating system called CPM. And there were no books. There were literally no literature. Nobody knew very much about computers at all. And so I really had to dig in myself in order to be certain that I understood everything by the time I'd worked it out, because there was always a changing staff, and you couldn't afford to have the knowledge of your entire business walk out the door. So that was one of the reasons that I got so very involved in computers, and I believe it was probably the very best thing that ever happened to USPTA in the end. So I give Mike Eikenberry a lot of credit for making us buy that computer.
The contributions that he's made to growing the game are numerous and incalculable. My greatest memory of regarding his contributions were when I was on the national board of the USPTA. Tim was constantly going on about computers and new computer programs and new ways of reaching pros, and I kept thinking, you can't hit a tennis ball with a computer, what's all this about? But he was way before his time in that regard. So his understanding of internet technology was his most valuable contribution.
Tim is one of the smartest men in our business. I mean, in the last 30 years, our association has grown incredibly to a $30 million business. He leads this association because he basically grew it. He's tough when he needs to be. You know, he's a great negotiator. He's into every aspect of the USPTA and what the tennis pro needs. There was a lot of criticism because he didn't smile very much. Well, the reason he didn't smile was because his mind was so obsessed with the USPTA 24/7. I mean, there wasn't enough energy left to smile, unfortunately. He just was on top of things inside his head all the time.
So we understood the business of tennis at a high level, albeit be, a time back in the 60s and 70s. What he did for the teaching professionals, which I think was really his most important contribution, was that he really gave them a voice. Probably the major contribution that Tim gave. The other thing that comes to mind is that he was so far ahead of the curve when it came to information technology and web-based technology. We were probably one of the first organizations so that every single member had our own website, and the USPTA provided that for us, and that was under Tim's leadership.
He's probably one of the smartest people I've ever had the pleasure of coming in contact with. I think he knows this business in and out better than anybody that I've ever met. Like so many other people, I just have the utmost respect for Tim, and I think that he's been absolutely amazing for the USPTA and for tennis. He put the USPTA on the map.
Tim, what was your mission to get the pros involved with computers so early on?
The thing about the technologies that we've applied are all aimed at trying to help teaching professionals do their job more efficiently. A lot of people have this impression that you're going to walk onto the court with a computer under your arm, and there's a whole lot of nonsense. But that's not what technology is about. If you go to our website, you see this map of technologies that are all designed just to help people do a better job and a quicker job of preparing for their lessons, with lots of tips by the very best speakers in the world. It really is a great educational tool.
What I really saw what Tim was all about, and actually saw his heart and his passion when I was serving as president in the late 90s. This is when I really got to know the real Tim Heckler. Tim Cause has done more for the tennis teaching profession, I think, than anyone in this business to date. He took the USPTA from a bunch of tennis pros and transformed them into tennis professionals. He bleeds USPTA, he always has. Being the way he was and doing what it did, I think it even helped the PTR. I mean, he's done more for this profession than anyone. Yep, we're going to miss him, Cause, I tell you.
Tim, you quickly got into the video production end of things. You produced On Court with the USPTA, airing on the Tennis Channel. Of what are you most proud in this production?
Let's say that video is really no different in the technological aspects of learning than any of the other programs that are now available. And so it takes a good bit of time to set it up, and then it takes time to do it well and to be able to hire the people who have the experience to come in and help put all of the main shows together and so forth. Originally, I used to do it myself just in order to be sure that I understood what was going on, but then we managed to hire a very productive young man who has taken it to the nth degree, and we now have probably the most extensive video lab in the tennis world. People should actually be coming to USPTA to ask them to produce their videos because they are really of commercial quality and excellent. And the other thing that I said about being so proud is the fact that along with this commercial quality, we've got the most qualified professionals in the world, like Rick Macy, Dave Porter, Brett Houghton, Nick Bollettieri, and many others who are all featured on DVDs now because of the video capabilities.
The educational component to the organization now, through all the resources, I mean, he saw this coming. He did that and just added so many more layers of educational value for being a member of the USPTA, and I think it's the most valuable resource. Educate yourself on a regular basis, way ahead of it. When they start doing Encore with USPTA, with the Tennis Channel, and you saw where all this was going.
Was really getting started then, and USPTA was trying to find its way. And it's not easy, but what Tim did was to organize, and he developed a brand, and people then wanted to join the organization. You know, a lot of people in the beginning made fun if you're a tennis coach. Oh, you get paid to teach people to hit balls. And what he did, he brought more so a lot of respect to the teaching pros. Well, I believe the fondest memory was me being awarded a Master Pro. You know, he kind of thought Nick was exciting that he gave me, you know, that liberty of letting me be one of the first Master Pros.
All started with me way back in the 50s and 60s, and I was very disappointed in what was going on with the USPTA. There were quite a few pros out here in California who basically saw it as the meetings and conferences as an opportunity to get together and share a beer. And then when in the 70s I was building the research center, and I went back to that meeting in Miami, and I ran into Tim Heckler, who was a researcher, and I said, well, this is a good chance for us to get some professionalism in the USPTA, and Tim was the perfect guy because he was involved in cancer research, and I know that he wouldn't set up a meeting just to have a beer. And so anyway, he turned it around, and for which I'm very grateful. Well, that being a researcher myself, that really intrigued me. For the first time, the USPTA began inviting experts in a particular field, and the pros then would have an opportunity to access that data, which they never had before. And so they would have to go through some other route with that. So anyway, I was very pleased. I wish Tim the very, very best, because he's still got a lot of good things in him to give to the public.
Right time guy. I mean, he came in and did it just wonderful for us. The name is near and dear to me. I enjoyed working with him, and he absolutely was someone far and above so many other people.
What I remember most about Tim Heckler is that he loved and respected the grassroots teaching pros. You know, the world says, don't sweat the small stuff. But it's written in Luke 16:10, he who is faithful in little is also faithful in much. That is the Tim Heckler I know. He was always looking out for the little things and representing the average teaching pro, the no-name guy in the trenches. When you cut to the chase, that's what Tim was all about. How could he make that guy more successful, better educated, and respected? That's what Tim loved to do, and that's what I remember most about Tim Heckler. How much he cared for the people he served and for the love of tennis.
Your stepson, Chris Huff, was #1 in the country in the boys' 12s and 14s, ahead of Jimmy Arias. What was it like to be involved with his tennis career?
Well, it was great working with him because, you know, he had such an incredible desire to be a champion. He would work intensively to succeed. When he was 7 years old, for example, he would ride 10 miles on his bicycle after school from our house to the club that I worked at in order to find a pickup game. I remember he used to stand on the veranda of my pro shop, and then everybody that walked up that didn't have a partner with him said, hey, you want to hit some? You want to hit some? So all the people got used to seeing him stand there, and they knew they were going to get a good warm-up before their regular game arrived. But it was great working with him because he had this great desire to win, and he did very well until he got injured when he was 16.
Tim was at his best when he was fighting fiercely against anyone, or for that matter, any organization that he felt might be threatening to the USPTA and or its members. That included, on a specific basis, Tim's belief that the USPTA was under threat of being acquired by the USTA. He was the warrior, and he was going to protect his turf. So that was another side, and he did it effectively, even if his resources didn't match those of the USTA. Tim lived up to his word, we lived up to ours. So I look back at that time very fondly. And by the way, as would always be the case when we got together with Tim, when we reached our conclusion and we accomplished what we had to, we all went out to one hell of a good dinner.
Well, certainly Tim made a big impact on the tennis industry. For over 30 years being involved as leader of the USPTA, he had a big footprint on tennis in the United States and even beyond that. I was fortunate enough to have a couple of different relationships over the years with the various companies that were endorsed by the USPTA, and always had a good, respected relationship with Tim, because we were always on common mission, and sometimes on different sides of the table as to what the value of that was, but we were always friends. And I think he organized it into a world-class organization that was like a corporation.
Certainly another competitor and an artist, your daughter Mia, is a highly talented singer. What do you admire most in her quest for the performing arts, singing and dancing excellence?
Mia has ice water in her veins, and she just loves to do what she's doing. For example, she spends 5 hours a day of every weekend. She spends 4 evenings a week either dancing or singing or play acting, and she absolutely enjoys it so much that she's got ice water in her veins when she does it. It's something that once she gets on stage, she feels no pressure at all. So I think what I was saying earlier about the pressure aspects, you can see the kids that are going to make it, and it's very simple by their dispositions.
I think he's a great speaker. He's always the smartest guy in the room. He really cares deeply about our sport and its future. One of the great things I think he's done is he's had some incredible conferences through the years, coaches coming together to share and exchange ideas. I know I've gotten so much out of the conferences through the years. I've enjoyed presenting at the conference. Tim, he's a very ethical human being. He takes always the right and the courageous stand. I consider him a friend. I'm proud of that. He's a guy I've always looked up to and admired. I salute Tim Heckler.
Trying to think back 30 years ago that Tim and I started talking about the need to work with little kids and get programs and develop a system to get the real little guys, the 4, 5, and 6-year-olds involved in tennis. And the concept was that the more kids that we got involved, the bigger the base would be, and the more players would go up through the ranks, and the more players we would have in the adult and in the competitive ranks, the greater the chance that we would have outstanding players in the adult ranks. Tim was a huge innovator in the concept of having a program that other pros could follow. Paul brought the parents on the court and got the parents involved, and Tim loved the idea, and then he started developing with the USDA the court fence at Arthur Ashe Kids Day. So we would put over 1,000 kids through court in about 2.5 to 3 hours. The kids were having fun. They were out there. They loved coming. They wanted to come back to the program. He was an innovator.
Well, you have a son, David, who's playing college tennis at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. What tennis advice has he been most eager to seek from you to share with you?
Well, David was reared during a different time, during the modern tennis age, so to speak, and it was important for both him and me to learn the art of modern tennis. We spent endless hours together, and also I exposed him to people that really did the modern game, like Rick Macy, Brad Hoffman, Nick Bollettieri, Dave Porter, and he really came around to playing pretty well. The only problem that we had was that David was also an excellent soccer player. And so it was only at 12 that I told him, go ahead and make a decision now, because you're going to have to specialize sooner or later if you want to get a college scholarship. And so he chose tennis. If I think back of all of the things I'm proud of and that he has learned, he's a very quick learner. He has one of the finest modern tennis styles of all sides of anyone that I've seen. This came from putting his mind down to it again and starting to work, but he started a little bit later than the other kids did.
And your daughter Chelsea also plays some great Texas high school tennis.
Chelsea, who was a very fine high school player, and she's at Texas Tech right now, not playing on the team, but all of my children have been very involved in tennis, and especially in Texas.
Well, that was a gift to you, Tim, to have your kids share that love of the game with you. Indeed.
Well, it's funny, and Tim, I think, will tell you this. I mean, I think we spent more time talking the last year or two than we did the previous 25. And he says the same thing. We wish we would have communicated more and spent more time working together to try to help both organizations and, in essence, help tennis. And Tim's a passionate guy, and he played more of a contrarian role. There was something that was being done, Tim would challenge it. In most cases, he challenged it because he didn't believe it was right, but in some cases, he challenged it just to vet things and make sure that it's been thought through. I told Tim that if he decides to do something, one of the things I think that he'd be very good at would play the role that Gene Scott used to have, where if he saw something he didn't like, he spoke up about it. Or Gene Scott was the conscience of tennis, and a person like Tim who's very intelligent, very articulate, he could fill that role.
Probably all started for me when I transferred to Ferris State University to be a part of their first group of professional tennis management students back in 1986. What all it took between the USPTA with Tim's leadership, the board of directors at that time, and Scott Schultz and those at Ferris State to make that program happen. I honestly don't believe I would be in the position I am today as a USPTA member, and the things I've been to accomplish during my almost 25 years as a USPTA member without, again, the work that Tim did, the board at that time, and those folks at Ferris State. The USPTA wouldn't be what it is today without professional tennis management programs. I owe a lot to all those that made that happen. What a great person, a great leader our association has had over the last 30-some years, and we can't thank him enough for what he's done.
You continue to have hundreds of friends in the tennis industry. The late George Basho was certainly one of them. Talk about the contribution that George made to growing the USPTA and the game of tennis in general.
George was probably the best known and beloved tennis teaching professional of all time, and still is. Virtually every award that is of any significance in our awards program has George's name on it. He was sadly taken away from us in 1999 in his late 60s, but he was devoted from the very day I met him to education and certification of tennis teachers, and he traveled across the USA and the world, in fact, doing so continuously. He was a man of phenomenal quality and love for USPTA and its members.
Right now I'm looking at a picture back in Hawaii when Tim, George Basher, and I were being honored. Every morning the picture reminds me of the happy and good days of the USPTA and Tim's and George's contributions to the organization. Tim Heckler was supposed to be perfect in every way, tennis, and his organization. USPTA right now, it is what it is because of the strong leadership that Tim had. I remember him greeting everyone at the main entrance with a firm handshake. I knew right away that he would be a great leader to the organization.
Cliff Drysdale says that you had his number on the court. And he laughs when he says that too, but what did you enjoy most about playing Cliff?
Well, it's probably the same thing as I did in every match, and that was winning. But Cliff's been very kind by at least telling that story, but you have to realize that Cliff was a late bloomer, and he and I played in South Africa a couple of times before he left. I was instrumental in encouraging him and the coach to bring him to the same university that I was at, Lamar University. We played again there. And then we went to this final tournament for Cliff in the United States, that is, and that was the big River Oaks Pro Tournament that all of the best players in the world played at. Cliff suddenly had a remarkable breakthrough. It was like coming out of the clouds. And he went, I think, to the quarters where he beat Ron Holmberg, who was number 7 in the world at the time. And, it's an interesting phenomenon. You often see a player who is good, but not the best yet. And suddenly he has a couple of wins, big wins, and just never looks back after that. So the South African Davis Cup team had called him very shortly after that and invited him to come back and be the junior player on the Davis Cup team. And he was, and the rest is history. Within, I think, 3 or 4 years, he was number 4 in the world.
Nice to be part of that, to witness all that, Tim. Over the decades, you've seen the game change. What are a few things that you're still holding on to from the older game of tennis? What are some transformations that you have been delighted to see?
Well, this can probably be my shortest answer, Dave. From the old game, the biggest thing missing is the fun and camaraderie among the players. As I mentioned to you earlier, every tournament on the tour or even in the juniors had fun dances and social functions every night, and all of the players went to it. They were all friends off the court. They all spoke in the locker room, and there just was no real enmities. So today that's changed a lot. The players are just not as social as they used to be with each other, and you don't see the same thing. From the current game and the current situation, I think that the modern style of play and equipment has made the game much easier and more exciting to play for beginners through pros. You have to realize a lot of people think that beginners can't play modern tennis, but they're completely wrong, because tennis is scalable. I call it scalability, which means that however hard the ball comes to you, you're usually playing somebody that's your own caliber, and you can hit the ball back, but still use more modern technique that gives you a lot more power and a lot more fun.
Tim Heckler, whom I consider one of the giants in the tennis industry over the last almost 50 years, but certainly definitely for the USPTA over the last 30 years. Tim and I go back a long time. I've been a member of the USPTA for about 40 years and have served as executive director and president of the organization prior to this taking over, so I can share a lot of the deep thoughts that he has regarding the organization and the difficulties that you run into sometimes in this industry. I'm happy to say that during the period that I've known him as executive director of the USPTA and the chief executive officer, that I can't think of a man who stands taller and has given more leadership and guidance and vision toward the teaching professional in the United States than Tim Heckler.
been outstanding as a tennis player himself. He has distinguished himself as an association leader. He has led this organization into the premier teaching association, not only in this country, but I would say even in the world. And he hasn't done it alone. He's had a lot of good help from people like George Bayshore, who helped him along the way and put forth great contributions as well. But Tim stands out there on his own in terms of the contributions that he's made. I'm delighted to be a member of the organization because of the things that he's been able to do and the professional image and the respect that the USPTA has gained in the tennis industry over those years. I think I speak for many qualified professionals across the nation when I say thank you, Tim, for all that you have done, and thank you for your guidance and your leadership, which without, I don't think there's any way we would be in the position that we're in today. So it's with great admiration and great respect, I do offer our thanks for the job that you've done, assuring you that I don't think there's anybody that certainly could have done a better job, and stand proud to be one of your great supporters.
Tim, I know that you have hundreds of people whom you want to thank for the encouragement they have given you through your career, through the years. Let's give you a chance to start with your wife, Renee. And who are some of the others that have reassured you along the way?
Well, you know, I sort of knew this question was coming, and it's really the only question that it would be unfair for me to answer. Obviously, it gets easy to say my wife and family and all of the great friends who've contributed to this videotape. But there have been so many others that I would be afraid of starting to name individuals for fear of leaving someone out. And, I'd like to leave it with a simple, heartfelt thanks to everyone that has reassured me during my successful life, and I've enjoyed it very much. And I especially want to thank all of the USPTA members that allowed me to serve them for 30 years. I just appreciate very much the people who've put this together and decided to honor me. It's a great feeling.
Tim, I can't let you off the hook. What about your wife, Renee?
Well, I mean, clearly she's been my best friend. She plays a very good game of tennis, by the way, and still does it at 5.0 level. And I was always encouraged to play with her when I could. And she's a great mother, and just somebody that is friendly to everybody. So I couldn't have done better. And it's really tough to talk about your wife because, especially if you appreciate her as much as I do.